Hello everyone, and welcome back to another commentary. So a couple years ago, a YouTuber called Guru Larry made a video called The Untold Rise and Fall Stories of 3 YouTube Gaming Channels, where he talked about the Irate Gamer as his first entry. Fast forward to the present day, and we have Neros Q, an infamous commentator who went on hiatus for quite some time, recently came back and made a response to Larry's video, and well, I can't say I'm a fan.
Was he any good? Well, he wasn't the best, let's put it at that.
Personally, I wish you said I think he wasn't the best, as that more easily lets the viewer know it's your opinion and not a fact. And on a side note, to people who put a disclaimer in their videos about their statements being opinions, you know that doesn't make everything you say an opinion, right? Sometimes opinions are connected to statements that can be wrong. Like saying, birds suck because none of them can fly. The first part is an opinion, but it's followed by evidence that can be easily proven wrong. If you love something, you should set it free. Now that's an opinion.
I don't know. I wish you would have said, I think that if you love something, then you should set it free. That way it would... Okay, I think you see where I'm going with this. Like, you're not technically wrong here. Saying, I think he wasn't the best would sound more opinionated, but when you bring up 2 examples of opinions that are direct statements, which you can clearly identify as opinions, then asking Larry to plaster, I think, over what he says feels needlessly excessive. Also, your tangent on opinion disclaimers really isn't relevant here, since Larry doesn't have that in his video, so I'm just wondering why this is worth bringing up in the first place.
Often criticized for his terrible research.
Larry, if you want to talk about terrible research, check that script you wrote. All you showed was an image of him commenting saying that the Sega Master System was made to compete with the NES. That actually is true, you know. It was created as a contender in the 8-bit era against various systems, like the Atari 7800 XE and the Nintendo Entertainment System. Are you talking about how the Genesis also came out to compete with the NES, which prompted Nintendo to make the Super NES? Because he's still not wrong. His info might be a bit skewed, but it is correct.
Actually, the Irate Gamer is wrong here, because in that comment, the Irate Gamer flat out says that the Genesis wasn't meant to compete with the NES. Sure, the Master System also competed with the NES, but that doesn't change how his statement about the Genesis was wrong. Which fits into Larry's point about how he's bad at research. Also, where'd you get these articles from? Because you don't put a link to that or any of the evidence you brought up in the description, so I'd have to go on a wild goose chase in order to fact-check your information. Now, granted, this also goes for Larry as well. I'd like to know where this was from so I can figure out the original context of this post. In short, both of y'all need to cite your sources.
Irrelevant references, and hilariously incorrect pronunciations of practically everything that came out of his gob.
Okay, first, anyone can reference whatever they want, as long as it relates to the subject at hand.
And Guru Larry was talking about the irrelevant references, meaning that they don't relate to the topic at hand, so going by your logic, his complaint would still stand. Now, granted, you do go on to mention how the Thundercats reference was actually relevant.
So let's take a look at that clip you just showed us from the I Rate the 80s episode 10, Color Forms. In this clip, Chris is looking at a 3D Thundercats color form. So how in the world is Snarf popping out not relevant? How about you do some research?
So Larry should have used a better visual here. However, saying that anyone can reference whatever they want as long as it's relevant is rather pointless, since Larry was specifically complaining about the irrelevant references.
Next, incorrect pronunciations? Are you really making an argument that he sucks just because he says words wrong sometimes?
Actually, Larry was saying that the Irate Gamer got criticism for a lack of research, irrelevant references, and frequent mispronunciations. He's not saying that his content sucks just because he mispronounces words, like you were saying. Let's not strawman Larry's points here.
If someone says a word or phrase wrong, it's usually by accident. And heck, sometimes there's even a cultural difference, like tomato in the UK and tomato in the US.
Are you going to prove that the Irate Gamer's mispronunciations were due to cultural differences? So this was just a pointless devil's advocate argument that doesn't debunk anything Larry said? Great.
And if you do want them to improve, is ridiculing them for it really helping? That's like if in the first grade, the teacher called you an idiot for saying Berenstein Bears instead of Berenstain Bears. The only way this would be a legit criticism is if they said it wrong on purpose.
Okay, I can see how poking fun at mispronunciations can be seen as mean-spirited, but the example you're comparing this to is overblowing the situation. Larry's not saying that the Irate Gamer's an idiot for mispronouncing words or anything like that. All he's saying is that Chris Boers got criticism for frequent and hilarious mispronunciations. Sure, he's making fun of how ludicrous these mispronunciations were, but he's not outright calling him an idiot, like what happened in your example. It also doesn't help that the irate gamer is a grown man, while your example involves a child, so it comes off like you're trying to pull a "oh, won't someone please think of the children" argument when that isn't even relevant here. If you want to say that Larry's being mean-spirited here, then fine, but don't compare it to a more extreme situation to make it seem worse than it actually is.
Case in point, Chris made such a terrible retrospective on the Magnavox Odyssey. It enraged the console's creator, Ralph Baer, to get out of his deathbed to publicly state how ignorant Chris was.
Irrelevant references and hilariously incorrect pronunciations of practically everything that came out of his gob. Case in point.
Or you're just glancing over parts of his sentence to make this look worse than it actually is. Larry said that the irate gamer received criticism for his lack of research, irrelevant references, and mispronunciations. The key part of that being lack of research. You know, the part of that sentence you seem to be ignoring in order to make this point. The case in point is supposed to encompass all 3 criticisms that Larry brought up, not just the last 2. Now, if you want to argue that Larry's being inconsistent because the email didn't bring up all 3 of these issues, then fair enough, but that isn't what you're doing. You're just cherry-picking parts of a sentence to make it look like he wasn't consistent at all.
You don't have to insult the man's review, especially since in that email you're showing, Ralph actually asked that no one attack the irate gamer for getting some information wrong. Do you even read what you include in your video?
Oh, please don't bring this attitude back. Just because someone insults a person's review, that doesn't mean it's an attack on the person who made it. A personal attack, or an ad hominem in this case, would be if Larry attacked the irate gamer as a person, like through his religion or his personal beliefs when they have nothing to do with the arguments at hand. All Larry said here was that the irate gamer's review on the Magnavox Odyssey was terrible and it showed ignorance on his part. Neither of those are ad hominem attacks, since all he's doing is showing proof as to why the irate gamer was bad at research. Saying that someone's review is terrible isn't an ad hominem attack, since at that point they would be insulting the review, not the person. In fact, in that very email, the writer insults a comment Chris made about how he didn't understand his review by calling it nonsense. So was Ralph Baer, the guy who wrote this email, suddenly making a personal attack against Chris because he insulted a comment he made? No, he just didn't appreciate the comment.
If you can enrage a man so much that he's prepared to defy the Grim Reaper to proclaim how crap you are, you must be bad.
Wait. Ralph Baer died in 2014. That email doesn't give a year or date. Defy the Grim Reaper? You're not really suggesting he came back from the dead, are you? Doesn't even make sense. Are you joking?
Yes, he is. He's saying that Ralph Baer was old and close to dying, yet he decided to use a lot of time and energy to write a response against the irate gamer. In other words, he was defying the Grim Reaper by staying alive for a long time. He was clearly exaggerating the developer's old age for comedic effect. I'm not sure why you're acting so confused about this.
Let me look in that email. So it looks like you took it from the Irate Gamer Sucks blog. Wow, such a creative name. So the email was posted Saturday, March 26, 2011, when Ralph Baer was around 90. So you mean the Irate Gamer's video series, The History of Video Games, was so wrong, it caused a dying old man to respond to him. Wouldn't that call for the validity of this email in general? Most 90-year-olds I've encountered can barely dial a phone, or remember their kids' names. What proof do we have that this is even the real Ralph Baer? I'm not saying it's impossible, it just seems very unlikely to me.
This is a really weak devil's advocate argument, since all you have to back it up is anecdotal evidence that's based on a stereotype. Just because you know a bunch of old people who are inept at using technology, that doesn't mean it's the case for all old people. It's especially dumb to bring this up here since Ralph Baer was an engineer and game developer. So implying that he likely didn't send the email since old people aren't good at technology is not only a ridiculous claim to make given his background, but it's also kind of insulting to the guy. Oh, this guy spent his life working with technology? Nah, he's old. He probably forgot how to send an email. Yeah, that's not disregarding his life's work or anything.
But even if this is the real Ralph Baer's thoughts, all he's even saying is that Chris should have done more research before making his documentary. I don't think that justifies your blatant attempts at disgracing his character. But I won't count this one as a sin, Larry. You had good intentions.
Now I'm starting to question if you read that email, or even the blog post it came from, since in that email, Ralph complains about how the irate gamer cusses and flat out says he doesn't approve of how he presents himself. And in the comments Ralph made towards the irate gamer's video, he also criticizes his use of swearing and vulgarity. So no, he isn't just telling him that he should have done more research like you're claiming, since Ralph is criticizing how the irate gamer presents himself.
But Chris's biggest criticism of all was his penchant to making videos almost identical to that of James Rolfe, aka the Angry Video Game Nerd.
You know what really ticks me off about this claim? It ignores all the other obvious ripoffs of the AVGN. What about Kid Icarus, Pro Jared, Peanut Butter Gamer, Brutal Moose, Antude, Space Hamster, or even JonTron? Those guys review both old and new video games, and can express extreme emotions towards said games.
And you just answered your own question. The reviewers you mentioned reviewed both modern and old video games, while the Angry Video Game Nerd and the Irate Gamer were both famous for reviewing retro video games in an overly angry fashion. So right off the bat, we can see the examples you brought up are more different to the AVGN than you're making them out to be. And that's not even mentioning how their personas are vastly different from the AVGN or the Irate Gamer, since their whole shtick was that they were constantly angry or irate at video games. Meanwhile, Pro Jared, Antude, and Brutal Moose were a lot more laid back than the AVGN, to the point where it doesn't even come off like they're playing a character. Sure, there are times where they got angry, but for the most part their reactions are a lot more subdued and grounded in reality when compared to the AVGN or the Irate Gamer. Now, for Peanut Butter Gamer, JonTron, Cat Icarus, and Space Hamster, while it's clear that they are playing a character in their videos, they don't really come off as angry all the time like the AVGN or the Irate Gamer. Their performances were a lot more surreal and eccentric, and that made them come off as more crazy than anything else.
I've defended this idea many times now, but just because you can argue that a show might be a ripoff, that doesn't mean it's a bad show.
You're acting like it isn't fair to criticize someone for ripping off someone else's content. Sure, there's nothing wrong with being similar to or inspired by something, but there's a fine line between being inspired by someone and flat out ripping them off, since at that point you're just copying someone else's work. Also, if you let Larry finish his point, he would go on to say that the Irate Gamer flat out plagiarized the Angry Video Game Nerd, which goes beyond simple inspiration. Anyways, after this, Larry uses this comparison video as evidence of how the Irate Gamer plagiarized the Angry Video Game Nerd, and I will somewhat agree with Neros here and say that this video didn't do a good job at showing what was plagiarized, since a lot of the points they compare have many noticeable differences between them. That being said, there are still examples here that do show clear-cut plagiarism on the Irate Gamer's part.
I wish I could go back in time to prevent this game from being made.
This game is so bad, I wish I could just go back in time and stop it from ever being created. What a shitload of fuck. What a shitload of fuck!
Cow a fucking piece of dog shit. This game's
Piece of cowabunga shit.
It's like you touch the top of the building, you die. You touch the ceiling, you die. You touch the floor, you die. Too far to the right, you die.
Touch the ceiling, you die. Touch the ground, you die. Touch the lava, you die.
So it's not entirely invalid. Keep this in mind, as this will be relevant shortly.
But ignoring that, how about we find out why the Irate Gamer series even started in the first place?
Well, yeah, of course it was. I mean, I had 200 subscribers. I didn't take this thing seriously.
So he's saying the first few episodes of the Irate Gamer was made just for entertainment? Not to make money or to get famous? I guess I can believe that. I mean, what's wrong with making a show for fun? And in regards to the similar phrases,
Over that summer, and you'll even see on the videos, that a lot of my videos were just, quickly banged out that summer. And I submitted all these into that Out-Nerd the Nerd contest. And, of course, I used some of his, a lot of his personality traits and whatnot, and threw those into the video to out-nerd him, basically.
those early episodes you're talking about are either not meant to be original or they're actually parodying the AVGN. If he wasn't making money or trying to get famous, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
This completely dodges the issue. Just because someone isn't making money off of something, that does not excuse them from plagiarizing someone else's work, since they're still passing off someone else's work as their own. And that's still disrespectful to the original content creator. Oh, but he was doing those videos for the Out-Nerd the Nerd contest, so he was just being out-original for the sake of that contest. That's not true, actually. Sure, the irate gamer is saying that a lot of his earlier videos were rushed out so that they could be put in a contest, but in actuality, the only review that was posted during the deadline for that contest was his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles review.
Ors also claims that many of his uploads from the summer of 2007 were made for this contest, when in reality, only one of his videos could have possibly been made specifically for it, that being his TMNT video, which was uploaded September 10th.
So this excuse would only work for that video alone, and not the majority of his content during that time. And as for the "ow, he was only parodying the AVGN" excuse, let's take a look at the Irate Gamer's review of Back to the Future for the NES. Do you see anything here that says AVGN parody or something like that? No? Then it's still plagiarism. Since the Irate Gamer isn't citing the source he got his points from, being a parody doesn't excuse anything since he doesn't make it clear that he's doing this to parody the AVGN. It looks like he's just trying to pass this off as an actual review.
Less sweary was literally YouTube's choice of words too.
What? Sir Edwin YouTube? Founder of YouTube.com? This quote is a blatant lie! Who the frick is Sir Edwin YouTube?
This was a joke. The name was made to sound more old-timey for the lols. You could argue that it's a shallow joke, but it's still a joke.
The founders of YouTube were Chad Hurley, Jared Karam, and Steve Chen! Larry, you literally made up fake evidence to back up your paper-thin claim?
Okay, now here's the funny thing. Well, aside from the actual funny thing, but still. I tried looking for this quote and couldn't find any evidence that this quote was actually said by someone at YouTube. Now sure, YouTube did promote the Irate Gamer's videos back then, and that is how he got popular, but as far as this quote goes, well, I couldn't find anything that proves YouTube actually said this. And Larry didn't put any evidence in the description, so if you want to argue that Larry isn't citing his sources and that makes this quote look fishy, then that would be fine. But no, Larry changing the name to Sir YouTube for a joke is the fraudulent evidence that destroys his credibility. Sure.
And don't try and say it was a joke. There was no indication that he wasn't serious about that.
You know, aside from the guy with a derpy expression and a black and white filter, along with the already stupid name Larry gave him, I don't know about you, but those sound like indications that they're jokes to me. Anyways, after this, Neros blows a gasket and goes into his murder time fantasy animation, so I think I'll just skip to my final thoughts. I normally don't like to use the term white knighting, but boy does that describe this response to a T. When you weren't making excuses for the Irate Gamer, you were overblowing Larry's distaste for him to an absurd degree and overlooking crucial parts of the argument. Which is a shame since I know you can make good videos, Neros. Your video on Anime America was pretty good, and I do respect that you at least try to be constructive with your criticisms. If you're going to defend someone again, I'd recommend looking at their work with a more critical eye so that you don't let your bias get in the way of your points. Also, try not to turn a blind eye towards points or evidence that might get in the way of your claims. Anyways, that's all I have to say, and I hope you all enjoyed the video.